How to Be an Artist. Step 26. Being Paid in Cool. With guest, Geoff Shupe.
So Geoff Shupe, it's awesome to be chatting with you again, man.
Thanks, man. You too. It's good to catch up.
We've got a really interesting history because it crosses over like a lot of different areas of life. Because I think we first got to know each other at Draw Night, right?
Yep, that's right.
Draw Night, and then you are one of the few artists. I don't know if there's any other artists. We were concept artists at both EA and Disney, and I don't know if there were any others besides us that did concept at both places.
Good question.
There were definitely other people that worked in different areas that were both at EA Salt Lake and at Disney, but even not a ton of those. But I think we might have been the only concept people that did concept at both places, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Salt Lake is definitely that really small microcosm for our industry. So I know a lot of people come back and forth. I'd probably believe that somebody else has, but I don't know who it would be.
Yeah. Well, because concept was pretty tiny at EA. So it's not like there was a lot of people that could potentially do both.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to be. We're in some of the few people that have the perspective to kind of have seen both of those cultures and be able to compare and contrast them.
Yeah, definitely, and that whole experience. I mean, 2 times over. It's the key experience I draw on when I tell people how important it is to network. To get jobs.
Yeah.
Like, I got 2 jobs through the same dude.
Oh, that's true. So, yes. Yeah. Well, I got a hiring bonus both times, so it was pretty cool. And I kind of chuckled the second time it happened. I kind of chuckled because I'm like, "Hey, we're doing it again."
Totally.
Yeah, that's true, and that's the case for me too. I mean, that's kind of one of the points I try to make is that. I think when people start out, they get really, really focused on like, I want to make sure I'm really proving it to this company. And I think the best attitude is to be like, what can I demonstrate to the people I'm working with? Because those are the people that are actually going to give you opportunities in the future, Yeah.
Yeah. There's like that mentality of, I just got to be good enough.
Yeah.
And that's like a half truth, right? Like you mostly have to be good enough.
You mean like as far as making art?
Yeah, like you need to be talented enough or the quality of your portfolio. Everyone focuses on like, if I'm just good enough, I can get any job anywhere that I want.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case, right? Like you do kind of need to be good enough. I'd say like 90% there because there's some room where people who aren't good enough still get jobs.
Yep.
But if you are good enough, that's still not enough. Like you need the connections and you need the familiarity and the relationships for someone to vouch for you because there's such a pool of talent out there that it's like, if 100 people are cold applying to a job and they're all qualified and they're all good enough.
Yeah.
As an employer, who do you choose? And you go with somebody who you already trust saying, yeah, I know this guy. They're cool to work with.
Yeah, and it's like it adds something to your portfolio that you just can't see otherwise. Anytime portfolios come in, we've both had that experience where you're hiring and you're like, oh, this guy looks good, but I don't know him. And then someone else comes in, it's like, oh yeah, I love working with this guy. There's this whole other factor of like, being someone that other people want to hang out with,
Yeah, being a good fit for the culture.
Yeah. And of course, like, I don't think I ever realized this to the degree that it happened when I first started working in the business, but these people become like lifelong friends. So that's one thing that you're like trying out for. And and you just keep helping each other out as much as you can. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of became the direction of where I tried to apply to after EA. Was once I realized the value of those relationships, those friendships, it was like, I really don't care about a particular project. There's very few projects that I'd be passionately like all in.
Mm-hmm.
on wanting to be part of the brand or whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that I want to work with. And so
Mm-hmm.
I started really prioritizing who worked where, and that was the studio that I wanted to be part of rather than
Cool.
a particular title, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, geez. And, uh, um, Avalanche or whatever, Disney Interactive was a great place in that regard. I mean, just some like fantastic people to work with, like in every sense of the word, right?
Oh, yeah. And it was so interesting to see people who had that mentality of like, Disney is the place I want to grow up to work at or aspire to work at.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant everything to them. They considered themselves like guardians and stewards of the brand
Sure.
to the point of almost being a headache sometimes, I guess you could say. But it was like, wow, like it was interesting to see different people coming at it from different angles because I had never aspired to work at a Disney studio. I didn't think
Mm-hmm.
my style was a fit for that kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then after years and years of everyone I know working at Disney, never making a job happen, and then they moved on. It was like, well, I guess that's never going to happen, but then it did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was awesome, dude. It was really cool having you there. That was good. It was good to be there too. Did you stick around till the end too, till like all the layoffs happened and stuff?
Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
got the. Well, yeah. You know me. Like I have a similar. I guess you could call it pessimism as you do. Realistic application. Uh, so it was like whatever, like a day or two before the quarterly earnings call, and it was like
Yeah.
this surprise all hands meeting that we had
Uh-huh.
not had for like the previous like quarter or two. It's like
Sure.
surprise all hands meeting. I'm like, oh, I know this formula. I know what's going to happen.
Like EA, it's like you went through it all in EA, right? It's like
Uh
we
huh.
experienced a lot of that there too.
Like
Yeah.
I know the recipe. I know the
Yeah.
play. And so we were walking into the meeting, and the guy I was walking in with. Did you ever know Dan Green? He was up on with the animators. This tall guy.
I don't think I did.
I was walking with him. I'm like, well, I don't see any boxes anywhere. This might turn out okay, but I don't think so. He's like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, like this is the recipe for when we all get fired. He's like, no, 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 just wouldn't believe it. And then
Yeah. No,
I
wait a
mean, I was
second.
half joking, right?
Did you also stick around to the end at EA as well till they closed
No,
doors?
no,
Okay.
I had that happened. I think that happened after Disney shut down,
Did
if I
it? Okay,
remember,
you might be right.
right.
Because it kept just getting smaller and smaller, and it went out with a whimper, if I remember.
Yeah,
It just kind
yeah.
of just kept getting smaller till it disappeared. Anyway, I interrupted you. Continue.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, so we go into the meeting and they're like, there's no easy way to say this, but we're closing down the studio, and what was his name? John, the main guy, the owner.
Uh huh.
He got up there and said his bit about how much he appreciated everyone's work, and
Mm-hmm.
then the corporate shill stood up and told everybody where to get their paperwork to go home, and that was that. And it
Oh
was just
wow.
like it was interesting because so many people were absolutely shocked.
Yeah,
To
they didn't
me,
see it coming.
I was like I always had that skepticism, so I wasn't surprised. Of course, I didn't predict it,
Yeah.
but it was just like, oh yeah, why would I think anything differently?
Yeah, I think we were kind of part of it. There was like a little faction of cynical artists at Disney that we were kind of all part of. I won't name any other names. I'm not going to out any of the other cynical ones, but um, I think everyone probably knows who they are. They're the ones that all had the highest salaries for their skill level because we were bastards about trying to get paid as well as possible as well, which is a good thing. Um, but yeah, I can remember having a discussion with some of the guys and just being like, it's inevitable. Like this is just the way this industry works, and it's just at some point it's gonna happen. I remember having a discussion like that right before I left, but I really didn't think it was gonna be like 6 months after I left that it was gonna
Yeah,
happen. But that was kind of after it happened. I was like, oh, it kind of feels like I predicted that, but Yeah, but that's just how games are. I mean, it's the way the product cycle works. It's not this like super sustainable, type of an industry. There's really lots of big hills and valleys and a lot of risk in it. And it's really funny that we know so many people that are like, they kind of want to be artists, but they also want the stability of being an accountant. So they go to these big studios, kind of thinking they're going to be able to get the best of both worlds, and it's just getting laid off it's just inevitable in that game.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think, especially with something as a company as big as EA or a company as big as Disney, you think, oh sure, the small players in the industry, they're the volatile ones. If you're part of a
Hmm.
startup or an indie studio, then you
Yeah.
might have a year, you might have three, but you're not going to have much longer than that. But a
Yeah.
studio, it's kind of something part of a legacy corporation, if you will. You think that's maybe a larger ship that can't sink, but if anything, it's just at the mercy of different forces. A $500 million tax write-off on our spreadsheet sure looks good this year. Or underwear and spreadsheets aren't as volatile,
Yeah.
even though this game is number one in its space at the time.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say it's really interesting too because in the particular case of Disney Interactive, like it got shut down specifically because Disney just decided to drop Disney Infinity, which
Yeah.
like by my best recollection of it, like Disney Infinity was gaining in popularity during that time, and so it's like if it had been a small studio, like that would have been the start of at least another, however many years of success. Like Disney
Mhm.
Infinity was doing great. And I swear I've seen more people playing it like since I left than I did before.
Oh
Like it
yeah.
really grew in popularity. There was really a foundation of something there that could have been something bigger. But as far as like fitting into the broad Disney strategy, it was too big of a risk. And so for this mega corporation, it didn't make sense, even though it was something that was a success.
Yeah. And especially on the tails of how successful it was for Disney to license out Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
Battlefront to EA. And
Uh-huh.
all
Oh,
they have to do
sure.
is look at it and go, hey, we don't have to float the risk. We just
Yep.
license it out and take a share of the
Yeah.
profits.
Yeah, it's really sad too because it was an amazing product and people really put their heart and souls into doing something that was like special. You know, they were not just phoning it in. So
Yeah,
that's
there
one of the
was cool
heartbreakers.
stuff. Yeah, and you see how prevalent that style has become in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And the Infinity wasn't. I mean, it basically ripped off the whole Clone Wars style and kind
Mm-hmm.
of polished it and refined it quite a bit. But it wasn't original in instigating it by any means.
Sure.
But but what it became has become like this pillar of style in the industry, and there's so many copycats out there
Oh,
now.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, but it's a benchmark that everyone else like measures stuff off of now. So
Yeah,
it's already
yeah.
left its legacy.
They can turn off the
So
servers, but those toys aren't going anywhere.
yeah,
Right?
exactly. So tell me a little bit about, I mean, this is some catch up. I know a little bit about this, but I'm interested in kind of like the arc of your career since that time. Like what sort of things have been going on with you and like where are you headed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one that's still unfolding in real time.
Yeah.
But so Disney shut down, and we had only been in our house for about 9 months
Hmm.
when that happened. And it was just like, oh crap, we hadn't been here for any minimum amount of time that would have allowed us to kind of fix it up a bit and maybe turn a profit on selling it around
Hmm.
if we were to move. So we're like, okay, well, we do want to stay in Salt Lake and we want to stay in the house that we just bought less than a year ago. So we really want to find a job in Salt Lake. And Disney, I think they handled that situation as best as they could have.
Hmm.
Like they had like they brought in like a job fair to the
Oh
building where
yeah.
like
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
30 other corporations from around the country came and had representatives interviewing people for jobs.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to see because you'd see it.
Like
There was
a
a
fire
there's
sale kind of, right?
Yeah, there was a handful of people who knew they were part of like the brotherhood and that
Yeah.
whatever was going to happen next they were going to be part of. So they didn't
Yeah.
even bother. and the rest of us really scrambled to make the next job happen.
Yeah.
So, but nothing panned out for me. But eventually a buddy of mine reached out to me here in Salt Lake, and he was part of this company, Daz 3D, and their company was expanding into other things because they needed a new business model and a new product lineup that would give their investors more of the returns that they're after. Because Daz has owned that market of, I guess, middleware assets for humans and clothing accessories for a lot of times. So,
that's been around a long, long time.
Yeah, and they know that there's not going to be much more growth out of that because they own that marketplace. So they had a new product that was VR avatar focused. It was kind of like a runtime equivalent to their people accessories. Whereas the DAS product is more of a render time kind of thing. So they wanted game people to come in and help them develop that. And so my buddy reached out to me, and they hired me as the lead artist, art director, and then our buddy from Disney, Wes Greaves, as the 3D artist.
Yeah.
So for a while, him and I were the production department, trying to like figure this out. So that was cool. I was at Taffy, the sister company that we actually worked for was called Taffy. They were owned by Daz. So at Taffy, being the art director, I was able to see a lot of different facets of the business, especially seeing kind of the headwind stuff that you don't see when you're in your silo with your head down at a larger corporation.
Yeah.
And I got an appreciation for how volatile every decision is all the time.
Wow.
Whereas when you work in a bigger company and you're doing your thing in your silo, you kind of only see the largest problems raise their heads. But if you're a manager in a more of a leading position, you see how finicky all these things are all the time.
Sure. Wow.
But over time, we were able to build our team. We hired a number of other 3D artists and other concept artists and started outsourcing a lot of content. And it got to a point where I was kind of sick of it.
Interesting.
So probably about this time last year, I was just really at my rope's end and probably starting to have a little bit more cynicism at work that people started picking up on.
Interesting.
But I wanted to see it through to the end because I felt it was really important to learn the lessons that this experience had to offer. So I wasn't going to quit. I just really wanted to see it out because my bets were either they closed the door on us or I'd get fired.
Gotcha.
So yeah, COVID happened. We all got sent home. My quality of life improved dramatically, like overnight, not having to go to the office every day. But
so let me ask you, where were the stresses for you, or where did that come from? Where did kind of being done with it come from? Was it like stresses? Was it the work you were doing? Like, what was the source of that for you?
Yeah, man, there was so many things. I think it was this convergence of a lot of different things. Because when I got hired on as the art director, that was my title from the very beginning. There was no other 2D artist, so I was doing all the 2D art.
Yeah,
and that's the part of it I really enjoy. But as our team grew, I ended up having to hire another concept artist to do all the concept art that I couldn't do.
Yeah,
and then. So I started doing less and less art and became more of a spreadsheet jockey, which to me is like it really rubs against, I guess, my ethics because you see the fiction of objective numbers like does not exist. People finesse, push and pull those things just as much as any drawing. Like it's just a spreadsheet is just as much a product of fiction as like any illustration is.
This is something we were talking about. My first conversation I had with Dustin Hanson, we were talking about this, how there's like, he says there's like an art to finance. Like you're trying to tell a story. You're trying to tell this story in finance, but you're trying to wrap it in this veneer of like objectivity or science or data, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a story.
Totally not. It's just a story. Yeah. And at times I felt like it was just outright dishonest. And I understand the value of spin, but I think there's a point when you can't just say things that aren't true as if they were true.
Now, was part of what was bothering you with all this, was it that a lot of the spin is then being used to mislead people you're working with? It's like you're telling the other artists almost that these numbers are being used against people that you're working with.
Yeah.
Is it something like that?
It was everything. I mean, in telling clients stories that weren't true.
Okay.
Manipulating your own team and your own people. I felt it was very important for me to safeguard my team and to let them do their jobs to the best capability that they could without having to deal with just the soap opera drama of political bickering at a managerial level. And then there were times where I couldn't even do that, where that did leak down to the team and it did impact morale and people didn't know where the company was going. So in the best interest of the company, I really tried to protect my team, because I felt like, well, if our mission statement doesn't add up and our projections don't add up, the least I can do is let my team do the best work they can. Then at least we have something to make a business out of.
Yeah.
When all these other things fall down. So yeah, that was really hard. I really enjoyed working with my team and seeing what they were capable of doing when they were given the room to do it.
Yeah.
But for myself, I realized it was a dead end as far as the career that I wanted to go. I don't want to be a spreadsheet jockey. I wanted to get back into getting better as an artist. And this idea of like being paid and cool. And I think this is what I mean when we talk about the people who really aspire to working on a brand or a title, where it's like, hey, do you want to come work on Star Wars with us? Yeah, Star Wars is cool. Great, because we can only pay you $50,000 a year. But you're working on Star Wars. Isn't that awesome?
Star Wars. And by the way, it's Star Wars themed cubes. It's like something that's kind of related to this thing you think is cool, but it's like the least cool version of that potentially, or least fun version of that.
Yeah. Well, you're not actually working on Star Wars. You're working on some kind of like franchise, like crap.
Well, that's exactly what Disney was for me. It was like this thing where I knew it impressed people in small talk to be like, I worked at Disney, but like it was a really empty thing for me to tell other people, because I wasn't, even though I was proud of the work I was doing, but there was like, this isn't really the work I want to be doing. And I actually feel like I had a similar experience to you at Disney, where I had a conversation with our manager probably 6 months before I left. And I was working really hard with like the marketing team that I was working with, and I had created like a whole like art guide for them for creating these like marketing images we were doing. And I just had this conversation with our manager, and he was like, like I talked to so-and-so up the chain. He said he's really liking the stuff you're doing, and that you're doing XYZ, and that, blah, blah, blah. And there was this type of thing where it's like, oh yeah, I could keep following this thing. I could become like an art director, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember riding my bike home that day, and kind of, it's funny because I must have had a mustache at the time, because when I remember this, I picture myself riding my bike home with a mustache. But I remember kind of thinking to myself, like this visualization of like my career climbing up the ladder in video games, and just being kind of like, I don't think I want that, And that's when I decided. That's when I'm like, okay, I went and talked to Annie, and I'm like, okay, let's start making plans for how we end this, how I transition out of this. So anyway, so you were talking a little bit about just the unease you were feeling in your work at that time. So I guess you can just like continue from there.
Yeah. And, every time I would talk with my management, they'd always be like, oh yeah, we're going to be doing this, and then you'll be doing that. And they kind of held it out as like this carrot, like they thought they were motivating me. But in my head, I was like, that's not what I want at all. And I'm really
Yeah.
disappointed that you can't even bother to ask me what I want out of this. Like, you just assumed that what you want out of this is what I want out of this.
They're sharing a
And there's,
vision without even asking if that's a vision
yeah,
that you're into. Yeah.
there's been no conversation about, like, what do you want out of this? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just like, I'm going to make this assumption and I'm going to act as if it motivates you. It's
So
just
can
like,
I ask you, like, at this time, like, what is your vision of what you'd rather be doing? That must have been going through your mind of like, oh, it'd be so cool if I could be doing, fill in the blank. Like, what is that for you at that time?
yeah, well, I've always been pretty good at maintaining doing the things I've been interested in,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but mostly under the guise of doing like studies or whatever.
Okay.
I would take like an hour or so each day and work on
Mm-hmm.
something of my own, like doodle a character or an environment or a little something or a painting
Yeah.
emulation, just under the guise of working on my own chops. And I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that. And
Mm-hmm.
especially when, when I was at Disney doing primarily environments, a lot of my personal time would be kind of more character oriented because I wasn't doing that
Interesting.
all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was working at Taffy and I was doing avatars and clothing and costumes all day, it'd be mostly environment related because it
Mm-hmm.
was also to counterbalance what I wasn't doing all day long.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's always like that vague my own thing, and you hear this from a lot of people, right? Like, oh, I just want to do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm probably like most people where the articulation of that just kind of stays there unless
Mm-hmm.
you put the time into developing and trying to articulate what it is that you want to do and why.
Yeah.
And so, in it was man, it was really crazy timing because it was the end of March. There was a fantasy arts conference put together down in Linden
Mm-hmm.
that brought in a bunch of fantasy illustrators that I'd really admired their work for a lot of years. And this was right before this was the week before we got sent home for COVID. So at
Mm-hmm.
this point, like I was at the lowest I'd ever been at work at this point. And then I
Hmm.
go to this week long conference, and I see what they're doing, and I'm talking to these people, and it just really put this fire underneath me of like, I want to do this kind of thing. I want to do, illustration, if anything, rather
Sure.
than
Yeah.
concept art, and just shift industries, and get work illustrating the kinds of stories that I enjoy, and making the art that I like making.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to this conference totally fired up, like, yes, this is what I want to do next. Because up until that point, even though I didn't like where my job was going, I didn't really know what to do instead.
Mm-hmm.
So this gave me the catalyst to start thinking about these things. And I stewed on it and I thought about it. And my wife and I had a lot of conversations about like, okay, this is the exit strategy. I don't know how long it will take to
Mm-hmm.
transition into freelance to a point where it can sustain our family. Our
Mm-hmm.
family is six, right?
Oh wow. Yeah.
uh, so it's like this might take 6 months, it might take 2 years, but whatever it is, this is the exit strategy to leave games entirely,
Hmm.
or at least this company.
Sure.
uh, but then, yeah, things kind of continued to deteriorate even after everyone was sent home for COVID, at least with me and my relationship with the company. And
Mm-hmm.
then out of the blue in June, they said I had a surprise meeting, and I love how sneaky they think they are because it's like this is the formula. You realize that, right? We're letting you go, and they refuse to give me a reason. So I don't even know why they made that decision at that time. They refused to tell me. So it could have been my bad attitude. It could have been something else in the company going on. It could have been anything, but they
Yeah.
refused to tell me, which was indicative of their character anyway. So whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, then being at home, you have the virtue of yelling at your boss with your spouse listening just outside your bedroom door. So conversation was over and it was like, yeah, well, I don't have a job anymore. And she had known how much I disliked it for a long time. And
Yeah.
so we were both happy that we'd finally just reached the end of that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I was more disappointed in how it went down and the lack of respect that
Yeah.
the company showed me than anything else. I'm glad to be gone for sure.
Yeah.
I think it just could have been executed more humanely with a bit more respect among people who had presumed to be friends.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so on my plan B, my exit strategy became plan now, like overnight.
Wow.
And so that's what I'm doing is I'm trying to pivot more into illustration, and I've been able to pick
Wow.
up a few jobs here and there since then, and enough to pay the bills between that and savings. But yeah, I'm trying to revamp my portfolio, trying to get that kind of work. I mean, in the meantime, I have been applying for remote positions as a
Mm-hmm.
concept artist or a
Yeah.
background artist for animation. But
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, those 30 or so applications I've sent out already have all been rejected.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm still beating down this path.
Yeah, I've definitely been through that myself. I mean, at the very least, you do have the luxury of yeah, you can apply remote, but I guess everyone has that luxury now too. So maybe it's there's more competition out there too, even though the positions are opening up, more positions are opening up, right?
Yeah, it's this weird position where I'm more experienced and more qualified for these positions than I ever have,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm getting way less response than I ever have to get
Wow.
a job.
Yeah, it may actually be a harder time now than it was when we were starting out.
Yeah, and
I
that seemed
think.
pretty hard at the time.
Yeah,
I got my
absolutely.
job in 2008, like middle of 2008 financial
Mm-hmm.
downturn,
Yeah.
and that was hard. It took me a long time to get that job.
Yeah, yeah. I was really lucky that I got in at EA just like right before the downturn happened, like economic 2008 stuff, and so it was really like, oh, we're going on freezing higher, everything tightened up, and I feel like it's definitely has been much harder for everyone after that to like get your foot in the door. Like I was super lucky I got my foot in the door.
Yeah,
But man, I just relate so much to that experience of like being in a shitty job and just feeling like you have to have an exit, like figuring out how am I going to get out of this? Because obviously it's like doing what we do, finding a replacement is not that easy,
oh, it's
unless you want
hard.
to like move across the country. And so, yeah, I've been in that experience before where it's just like you feel very stuck. You feel like if I want to do this, I have to stay in this place. But like, my God, how great of a feeling it is when you get liberated from those positions, right?
Mhm. Oh yeah,
When you're just like, oh, that's over, and that sigh of relief. So,
yeah. For me, like I felt like the sun was warmer, the air was fresher, the world was a better place. Like even though I had like this knife sticking out of my back,
yeah,
but it was just like I really enjoy this. I'm glad not to be there. I'm glad to deal with this challenge, which I think is more meaningful than the crap we were doing at work.
yeah, that's just one of the saddest things is when, and it's so hard because I think we put that on ourselves a lot, like the bad situations we are in, where there's such like a pressure on us to be like, you need to make the best of this thing. But a lot of times just getting out of a bad situation can be like the healthiest thing. Like if you have people that you don't like working with, that aren't like a positive influence on you, that aren't helping you to be the best you can, where you're feeling like relationships can do either two things. Relationships can either traumatize you or they can like heal you. Like they can either be
Mm-hmm.
therapy or they can be torture. And so it's like I just think it's really sad that people spend any time at all in working in these jobs that are just like where they're just damaging themselves psychologically while they're there, right? Which I've done
Yeah,
for sure.
no, that's so true, man. Like I would love. I didn't know. Well, it was an open question for my wife too. If she could tolerate me being home all the time.
Yeah.
but it's worked out really well, and I love it so much just to be able. I have a lot less work than I'd like,
Yeah,
but I have so much more work that I enjoy doing.
that's cool. That's very cool. Are you able to do? Are you able to feel like you can determine the direction of the work you do a little bit better now, or are you still
Yeah,
kind of like taking what you can?
kind of. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a catch what you can kind of situation, but
sure.
I've noticed that there's this kind of self-sorting emergence that comes out of the process where,
Mm,
especially earlier to get the first job, it was like, are you good enough? And kind of like, are you competent? Like, could you
mm-hmm.
draw something that we told you to draw? And I feel like that
Yeah.
was the criteria I was hired under. And
Mm-hmm.
then to get hired at Disney, I feel like it started moving a little bit more towards like a particular capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you draw Star Wars? Because that's what I was hired to do was the Star
Yeah.
Wars Disney stuff.
And you were really doing a lot of like environmental stuff too, right? At Disney.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that my portfolio being environment centric and being like sci-fi and military centered lent itself to
Mm-hmm.
being hired to do Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
And then, but because I had the advantage of an old friend of mine from college, who was the one who hired me at Taffy or at Daz,
Mm-hmm.
he knew that like those barriers between what you've already done and what you could do are pretty permeable. And
Mm-hmm.
artists know this, but no one else seems to know this. Right? So he knew that I could draw anything he threw at me. And so
Mm-hmm.
even though I didn't have a portfolio full of avatars and people, he knew that I could. And then I
Yeah.
spent the next 4 years doing that. But now I'm in a situation where perhaps I am skilled enough, or at least my work does look relatively skilled enough that people expect that what's in your portfolio is your thing. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's not your, and then if they have a project and it's not your thing, then you must not be a good fit for it.
Yeah. Sure.
So I'm getting a lot more work that looks like what's already in my portfolio. But as an
Yeah.
artist who's trying to grow, I'm trying to get new work, doing new things that I haven't done yet. And that's the most uphill
Gotcha.
battle of it all.
Are you trying to create like new portfolio pieces that kind of represent kind of the new directions you want to go? Is there like a
Yeah.
specific place you'd like to grow then?
Yeah. Like, you talked about wanting to put more time into your writing and that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about too a lot is, I'd be in these interviews or these questionnaires for people vetting me to see if I'd be a good fit for their project. And it always comes
Mm-hmm.
down to this thing, right? Like you haven't already done this thing that we want to do, so we don't know if you can do it. And we're
Yeah.
and we're making a bet that you probably can't for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at the landscape going, well, there's like, a million different styles out there and a million different genres and subjects. And if I need to spend my time seeding my portfolio with examples of work that will look like things that they're doing so that I can get the job. At the end of the day, I don't have enough time to do everything. So
Yeah.
what do I really want to do? What do I really enjoy doing the most? And then I'll get those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I haven't seen this play out entirely yet because it's a new chapter for me.
Mm-hmm.
But like I've always just absolutely loved the classic fairy tales and golden age illustration stuff. But
Cool.
that's the kind of stuff that I look at and go, oh man, this is amazing. And if I could ever do something like this, I would be very pleased with myself.
So what type of artists are you thinking about when you say that?
There's like like Arthur Rackham, uh, the old school fairy tale guys. My favorites have always been Edmund Dulac. He's got these
Okay.
amazing watercolors,
Okay.
and
I have to look
like
these up.
Keith Robinson, um, all the typical people that people in this space always cite.
Okay.
H.J. Ford, just amazing stuff. And then you jump forward about 60 years,
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
Duloc. I love this guy's stuff.
it's so amazing, right?
Duloc, what I really love about Duloc is that he has kind of these very flat perspectives, which I
Uh-huh.
really like. I really dig his way of composing a scene and making it interesting, but he doesn't do like a ton of depth in his scenes. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's like this compositional device that it's hard to tell whether it was a product of its time
Hmm.
or it was something just like done entirely on purpose.
Yeah, I was actually looking at a lot of Duloc stuff when I was doing some of my Green Monk stuff, as
Oh
far as like
yeah.
colors and compositions. Anyway, I it's funny you say the names. I'm like, I don't think I know the name, and then I like look it up. I'm like, oh yeah, I've pinned this stuff, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, well, on that tangent, one of the things I've gotten really into this rabbit hole I've gone down the last 6 months is
Hmm.
all the like all the Russian illustrators that were still doing
Oh
this kind of thing through like the
yeah,
70s. I mean, it kind of ended in the
yeah.
U.S. with the arts and crafts movement. That was kind of the end of it.
Hmm. Uh huh.
Uh, but over in Russia, it was like it really came into its own through the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And
Hmm.
you see these guys doing just like amazing stuff that just captures this flavor and this spirit so immaculately.
Yeah. I bet you I probably know some of these guys. Is that it was like Bilibin? Would he be in or in that time period, or was he earlier?
He was earlier. He was more like
Okay.
Walter Crane era.
Okay.
So he has a lot more kind of that deco early arts and crafts influence. And the
Yes.
stuff that he's known
Yeah.
for looks like that. He did lots of other stuff that is more of a traditional Russian illustration approach.
Uh
But
huh.
what he's known for is that kind of quasi arts and crafts stuff.
There's another Russian guy I'm thinking of. I'm gonna have to look up on my Pinterest, but oh no, yeah, yeah, Gennady no Novozilov. This guy's stuff's
Oh, yep.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know this guy. His black and white
Um,
stuff is killer.
like his
It's
ink
so
stuff,
killer.
pen and ink stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah, this guy's man, some amazing Russians out there.
Yeah, and
Um,
the guy that I've really clued into, I picked up, I just stumbled across a book of his. He's not a Russian,
mhm.
uh, but he's a guy who he's still alive actually.
Hmm.
Crap, what's his name? Victor Ambrose.
Huh.
I believe he might have been Hungarian originally, and then he emigrated to the UK, and he built his career there. But his background was engraving, and then he
Interesting.
transitioned to illustration. So he's got this old school kind of style that looks like some of the old stuff, like Joseph Cole or William Gibson, where they were inking for what could be reproduced with engravings.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at some of this guy's stuff right now.
Yeah,
It's
Victor
pretty cool.
Ambrose. Like there's this looseness and this color and abstractness that all kind of
Hmm.
comes together, and it just lights up my heart in like all the right places. So he's one of
Man,
those
some
guys
really
that
cool
was
pen
like,
and ink stuff.
yeah. So he's one of those guys that I recognize the perhaps the futility of ever trying to arrive at the artist you want to be.
Uh
That
huh.
there's more value in just the eternal pursuit, or what I
Sure.
consider like eternally failing on your own terms. Like this is something that it's okay to fail at because you enjoy failing at it, so you can just do it
Yeah.
indefinitely. If if I could become this guy and spend the rest of my life achieve like making images like this, I would be happy.
So what type of media are you working with lately? I mean, are you trying to kind of replicate this stuff digitally, or are you doing any like traditional media?
I'm trying to inform both.
Okay.
So, like, if you look at my Instagram, you'll see a lot. There's this kind of like this 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 shift where you see a bunch of digital stuff and then a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of traditional looking stuff. And I've,
Okay.
I've gone back to paper quite a bit. I'd always sketched in a sketchbook for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but now I'm trying to like do finished work on paper rather than only
Mm-hmm.
digitally. Like, can I take this to the level that would be like a finished product rather than just a study or a sketch? And
Yeah.
so I'm getting into like ink and watercolor and colored pencils and markers a lot. So it's definitely
Nice.
this this multimedia kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
But then I take that back to digital and say, well, what am I learning on the paper that applies in the digital space? And
Oh,
then
that's
can I do
cool.
things digital to kind of look this way, but with the advantages of being digital, like in terms of opacity and layer styles and layers. And then I go back to the paper and go, oh yeah, I kind of figured this out digitally, and I take that back to the paper. And then I go, oh yeah, I figured this out on paper, and I take that back into digital. So it's this amalgam right now.
Yeah, that back and forth. I think that's where the real power is when you recognize that these things are both tools. You know, we definitely went through an era where the computer was so novel and magical that we were just like, it was easy to like become kind of dogmatic about it. Really to become dogmatic one way or the other. To be like, oh, a computer can never be like paper. And other
Yeah,
people
there's
would be
a
like, man, it's all
about
digital.
that, right? Yeah.
I'm just all digital, man. But now we're getting more to a point where it's just like, here's two tools. What can we learn from these two tools? Like, and I think it's really cool, that idea of like, how can digital inform, like doing stuff digitally can make us think about traditional in other ways and open up opportunities traditionally, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, when I was in college, I was teaching photography classes for Ritz Camera,
Mm-hmm.
and digital cameras were just they were making they had finally arrived in the mainstream, but you
Mm-hmm.
still had all these holdout elitist SLR guys who were like, digital sucks, film's the way to go. Like maybe, but like I'm teaching these classes to beginners,
Mm-hmm.
and digital is the learner's, the student's best friend.
Sure.
Because only with digital you can get so disposable that you're not afraid to make mistakes and try things out.
Yeah.
Like you don't make enough money to blow through 1,000 rolls of film and go, oh, lesson learned, and then toss them all in the trash.
Yeah.
But you can do that with a digital camera, and I would just encourage people, like, just go digital, take 10,000 photos and learn how to become a good photographer, and then make the decision about whether you want to move to film or stay with
Mm-hmm.
digital.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of approaching it. It's interesting though. I even like watch my daughter. My daughter's starting to get really interested in art, and she's back and forth all the time too. Like she definitely
How old
spends a
is she
lot of
now?
time digital. She is 11. She's going to turn 12 in a couple months.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, but yeah, just over the last couple of years, she's really taking an interest in art. She's just kind of at that age, you kind of around that 11, 12 age is where like that spark really happens, right? With your interest. And there can be like a lot of growth depending on where you want to like focus your attention.
Yeah.
And it's really becoming one of these things where I'm just like, shit, my daughter is like going to be a better artist than me. Like I
Yep.
can see how fast she's improving, and that she's definitely putting in way more effort into it than I ever did, like as a kid.
I was probably about 12 when I came across my first issue of X-Men at the 7-Eleven.
Uh
It was
huh.
X-Men. It was the new X-Men, like number like 3, so it's still Jim
Was it
Lee
like
era.
Jim Lee?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, for
I
sure,
was just
man.
like, what is this? This is
Yeah,
so awesome. And here we are.
yeah. I had pretty similar introduction around the same age, and it's like the same artists. It's like everyone saw the same stuff at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's interesting. So I'm kind of interested. Like one of the things I've definitely thought a lot about is kind of how my view of kind of the industry, and also just kind of like just the dedication to making art, how that's changed from when I started as an artist to like where I am now. And I'm kind of interested after the experiences you've had professionally, like what do you think are some of the biggest changes in how you think about the whole discipline of making art?
Yeah, good question. I think, and for me, and this is only a newer realization. Uh, for me, there were the artists who I always liked their work, right? But I'd
Mm-hmm.
always been really skeptical about the elitist kind of art definitions, or
Mm-hmm.
or these concepts of purity in art relative to a medium or a subject or expression, whatever. Because I went through a really artsy fartsy program up at the
Mm-hmm.
U, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just like this Ripley's Believe It or Not of what can pass as art, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so like my experience is that my BS skills got really good in class, and then I'd have to work on technical skills on my own time.
Yeah.
I was never really all in for those kinds of definitions, and what I understood my aspirations to be was just a competency issue. Like I really had the most respect for the forgers, the guys who could pass off a Monet or a Rembrandt or a Picasso to some kind of prestigious institution.
Sure.
And I thought, man, Rembrandt, Picasso, they spent their entire lives, working on their thing.
Yeah.
And here comes a dude who can do it so closely that the self-appointed experts can't tell the difference.
Dude, I think that stuff is super. I saw a video about a guy once, and he showed all of his techniques, all the research he had to put into like making these forgeries. I think it's incredibly inspiring, honestly.
I looked at these guys like, man, they have the widest, deepest skill set that they can do anything that they want to do, and their style isn't inherently some expression of the shortcomings or things that they can't do. There's like they can actually do anything that they want to, and so that was my inspiration, was just like I want to be able to do anything that I want to be able to do, and I found a kindred spirit in Ben Simonson at Disney. He had a very similar approach, where just be able to do anything with any medium and make any look, and style becomes more of like a necessity of storytelling or experience relative to that game or story or whatever, rather than like your calling card or your thing. And that's what I'd been aspiring to for a long, long time. But what I found in my current situation is like we were talking about, is that people look at your portfolio and go, oh, well, you can only do the things that are already in your portfolio. I have, if I had like 5 images of dinosaurs on skateboards, people would look at my portfolio and go, oh, you can only draw dinosaurs on skateboards. You can't draw anything else. We have this book about crocodiles. I guess that's out. We have this book about pro athletes. I guess that's out. Even things that you would think are like right in the same ballpark. For some reason, recruiters or agents or whoever they are, they can't seem to make that crossover from ability is ability, right?
Sure, yeah.
So not becoming a generalist, but having this very wide skill set kind of makes you invisible, where you're not recognized as being able to do all these other things, even though you could, given the opportunity. So that's what I've tried to say, well, what needs to be my thing? And I guess I'll build my brand or my momentum around that, so at least that I get more work like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a really interesting strategic question, is like trying to sell yourself as a generalist, which can help depending on where you're going. Or a lot of people, it is about, here's this specific thing that I do and I'm going to do it really well. It's funny. I was at CTNX a few years ago promoting my book, and I went a day early to do this workshop with Kim Jung-gi. And it was super interesting because be able to ask questions about like, how do you approach, and he's the guy that can he just kind of sits and draws stuff without sketching it out or anything, Right. And it's interesting to kind of ask him questions. I was able to kind of ask really specific questions about how are you thinking as you're doing this? How are you approaching this? Et cetera, et cetera. And it was really revealing to kind of hear some of the way he thought about things. But the workshop also had one of his colleagues, and his colleague, basically, he had really focused his whole career on being the world's expert on drawing skulls. He's like, my whole focus is to know the human skull backwards and forwards as better than anyone else in the world, Awesome. And so that's kind of his strategic, and he kind of made this recommendation. He's like, hey, if you want to make sure you've always got work, find one thing and just become ridiculously good at drawing this one thing and become better than anyone else in the world at drawing this one thing. So I don't know if you want to get that specific, but hey, I think like the left clavicle is still available if you want to become like this.
the third metacarpal.
Yeah. But yeah, he went through all the details of like, here's the skull from all these different angles. And he's like, oh, wow, this guy knows skulls really well.
Geez, that's cool.
And doing skulls as he is, but something similar, I guess.
Yeah, and I'd always resisted that, like, just become the very best at these things. And I'd heard that a lot as a student, that there's a price to be paid when you choose to become a generalist, like, jack of all trades, master of none, because the industry is so competitive that at the cream are all masters of what they do, right? But there's the reality is that there's a lot of jacks that are needed just as well.
Yep.
I'd say the majority of the studios out there, they need jacks because they don't have the budget or the time to pay for a master. Like, you can make a good living at a lot of different places not being the master of one thing. But we get this voice from the top 1% saying, well, this is what I do, so that's what you should do. This is where all the rock stardom is and the big bucks are.
That's a really good point, is a lot of the advice we get are from people that are kind of a very small sample of the people that are actually out there working. So we get a lot of like unrealistic expectations of what the career path's going to look like. Of course, those are the people everyone wants to listen to, because they're like, hey, if you want to do this, you should listen to the best. And the truth is the best are kind of playing by different rules, than everyone else. I mean, these are people that likely have talents different than ours. Very, very certainly there are people that almost always have better work ethics than I do. So a lot of the advice you get is just like, oh yeah, just make life your one and only, make art your one and only obsession. And just, that's all you do all the time ever. That's the secret to success. And I've tried to do that. And it's just been like, yeah, I like the rest of my life too. I don't want to just obsess about art all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes a prison.
In service to what? So so that Star Wars can say, hey, thanks for this droid.
Exactly.
Now go get your job on your own. Like, thanks, sucker.
Well, so anyway, while we still have a little bit time left, hopefully, if you have some time, I wanted to ask a little bit about like some of the Ninja Warrior stuff. I remember when we were at EA, we used to go work out. There's a gym in the basement of the building where EA was. We'd go work out and go do our pull-ups and stuff. And I ended up like screwing up my shoulder. But you went on to, but after a while we started doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Like we'd go to the parking garage and we're like, let's try climbing up this railing, And you went on to take that very seriously, with all the Ninja Warrior stuff. So yeah, tell me a bit about like how that has all happened.
Well, I did. I guess you could say I do have a bit of a background in rock climbing. After the mission, before I was married, I had a number of years where a buddy of mine and I went out and did rock climbing like multiple times a week.
Awesome.
And where we would do really long, high, difficult stuff. And then we got really hip to it's called bouldering. It's bouldering in rock climbing is where you work on a low elevation boulder, a big piece of rock, right?
Yeah.
There's no ropes or anything. But you go climb buildings the same way. So we'd find buildings with interesting facades, and sometimes we'd use ropes and stuff and do a little bit of trespassing if necessary. So I always enjoyed that kind of stuff. And then, their CrossFit kind of came around, and through the Jim Jones connection here in Utah, with the movie 300 and that kind of stuff started getting a lot more mainstream traction. And it just looked so fun to me that it was like real application kind of stuff rather than just being good at going to a gym and working with a pec deck, right?
Yeah.
So it always just seemed fun. So I was always looking for things to kind of build on that. And then so you and I did our screwing around kind of stuff, and me and other friends would do other things. But then the Tough Mudder race, the franchise
Oh
came to town.
yeah, that's right.
So that must have been like probably not too long after you and I were doing our shenanigans in the garage.
That was, I actually had signed up for that. And then I was just
Okay.
like, yeah, hopefully I can rehab my shoulder. And my shoulder was just by the way, it's like finally better now. And I'm like doing pull-ups and stuff again. But at that time I was like, oh man, I hope I can make it. And I was just like, I can't do it, man. My shoulder's just screwed up. And you went and did it. And I was super, super jealous.
But yeah, so I trained for that race, and it was like, we trained for it for like 3 months because it was in the end of October. And in Utah, that can either be 35 degrees or 80 degrees, right?
Yep.
and this, fortunately for us, it was 35 degrees. So it was like a really brutal race, but it was just fun to get out there and do these obstacles. And so I got into this obstacle course racing for a few years. So I did like a race or two every year for like 6 or 7 years, doing Spartan races, Battle Frog, and whatever else came around. But there were always these like 10, 12 miler races with so it was just a lot of running between obstacles.
Yeah.
And then Ninja Warrior, blew up on TV, and I started watching that, and it was like, this is like obstacle course racing, but without the racing, without
just the obstacles. Let's just do the obstacles.
So I was like, yeah, I'll do this, And then a pro level gym opened up in Ogden. And so I'd already been doing pretty good at Spartan races where I wasn't doing them competitively by any means, but I would run through a 8 to 10 mile race, like no problem. I wouldn't fail any of the obstacles. And I was like, yeah, I could do this Ninja Warrior stuff. And so I practiced at the playground at the park near my house for a while, just trying to transition between the monkey bars and pipes and different platforms and just crazy kind of parkour kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I go to this competition, and it's like me, and there's maybe like 2 or 3 other guys that are like my age. And at the time, this is like, I'm 35 or something.
Yeah.
And then all these other like 16-year-old, 18-year-olds, 20-something-year-olds. And I just like sucked it up. Got dismissed in the first round. All these 16-year-old kids just schooled me. And I thought, oh man, if I'm ever gonna even have fun doing this, like I need to train more, and more specifically. So when we moved into our new house right before Disney shut down, it was like the first thing I built was a salmon ladder in the backyard. And it took me about a summer to be able to pull it off with a high degree of confidence.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I did wrestling in high school, and so I knew what it was like to train hard and make your body really hurt. And I hadn't experienced anything like that until I got into the salmon ladder, where I would do these workouts, and then like for the next 2 or 3 days, I'd be like on the verge of tears, like my arms like hurt so bad.
Really? Wow.
Because it's just really hard on your like connective tissue.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of conditioning to get the strength to do it. But then, yeah, I just progressively built more and more up in my backyard, and built connections with other people in the Ninja Warrior community. Went to a few more competitions, and just have had fun doing it. And now, I'm in my 40s now. I don't have any kind of aspiration of getting on the show. First of all, I don't have like a very interesting sob story. But also I'm really not that good competitively, especially when you see all these 18 to 22-year-old kids just killing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have fun. My kids have fun. I take them out to the gym with me every once in a while. Well, when they were open, that is.
But you've got a pretty extensive setup in your yard now, right? Last time I saw photos of it.
Yeah, you saw those photos?
What all do you have in your yard now?
So the house that we got came with a little RV awning on the side of our house in the backyard.
Yeah.
And
so it's an all-weather.
Yeah, so we're not going to be storing an RV there anytime soon. And so even when we bought the house, I was like, oh yeah, I could build a ninja course underneath this that would be protected from
Nice.
the rain and everything. So that's what I did. I built a framework. It's about 12 feet tall out of
Uh-huh.
these 6x6 beams.
Mm-hmm.
And then inside that framework, I put a bunch of other stuff. So it's mostly upper body stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I built some quintuple steps that are just, I
Okay.
can just move them around and I can run back and forth on them. I got a slack line. I can practice my balance on that.
Wow.
And then I've got the salmon ladder. It's a 16-foot salmon ladder, and I usually only use the first one or two rungs, just going back and forth because I've taken some good falls.
Oh,
and,
geez.
and I don't have like really good mats, at least at my house. I haven't taken any good falls at home, fortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I've taken some like falls from the top, like at the gym,
Oh,
and you're falling on like a 10-inch mat, and you get a thump, but you're not really worse for the wear. But
yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, oh man, if I did this on the grass at home, like I'd be in big
Yeah.
trouble. So I can't
Sure.
chance
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got some devil steps, which are essentially like you climb up the step underneath the bottom of the steps with your arms, kind of like what we were doing in the stairwells
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
EA.
Gotcha.
It's basically that.
Yeah. Okay.
Got some lache bars that are they're basically like monkey bars, but the
Uh-huh.
bars are spaced really far apart. In my case,
Huh.
4 feet. So it's a little bit
Wow.
longer than a full wingspan for me, or a comfortable wingspan.
Hmm.
So you just have to
Yeah.
let go and fly to the next one.
Wow. Okay.
I've got a big pegboard, and then I've got like a whole bunch of just grips that are just suspended from ropes and chains and things. So I can
Cool.
change those up. They're like cones or baseballs or boards or really anything that I can find at DI or Savers I think would be interesting to hold on to with a grip. So I have like some bowling pins, I got some bowling balls. Those are fun to hang on to.
I really need to come if you let me. I need to
Oh
come
yeah,
check it out sometime because
for sure, man.
about the past year I've just been working on like doing body weight stuff. Actually, probably a year and a half now, just doing body weight stuff. And I can finally like do pull ups again now, which is pretty cool. And I do some rings that I play around with. But yeah, I mean, I can do monkey bars, but it'd be fun to see how much I would suck at some of these other things. So
Yeah, you watch the show, and it's so easy to watch the show sitting on the couch, right? And
sure,
it's like a guy falls off, and you're like, oh man, if you would have just
just grab
hung on
that
to that
thing,
thing for
dude.
another half a second, geez, why did this
Yeah,
occur to you? But then
yeah,
you get on it, and you're like, oh dang, this is pretty dang hard.
yeah.
So while I may be, in the top 1% of my immediate friend group, I'm
Mm.
in like the bottom 10% of everyone who actually does this. Right?
Yeah, it's just the reality things, right?
Yeah.
Do you find, I mean, now that you're in your 40s, do you find the recovery is a little bit harder too?
Yeah, it's recovery takes longer. Like I'm definitely
Yeah,
if I get hurt, I'm injured longer.
yeah,
If I'm sore, if I got sore at all, when I was younger, it would happen like the next day. I'd wake up the next day sore and stiff.
yeah,
But then I could usually flush it out by just doing some light whatever.
yeah.
Nowadays, if I really work on it, it doesn't set in the next day, but it sets in like the day after, and then it just
Yeah, it
really,
happens to me too.
yeah, does that work that way? And then you're stuck
Yeah.
with it for like 2 or 3 days.
I am now at the point where when I work out, even if I work out regularly, it used to be I would start working out and it's like the first couple workouts I'd be sore and then I'd adapt to it. When I work
Mm,
out now, it's like I am sore every time I work out now.
yeah.
So I don't know if there's things I'm doing wrong as far as maybe I need to be switching it up too much, but I mean, I have one thing I have considered. I don't know if I would do this, but like my brother does like TRT,
Uh,
like testosterone replacement therapy, you know?
yeah.
And it's like he was telling me like, yeah, I think I'm going to try doing TRT. And then it's like I see him like a month later after he started and I'm like, I can definitely tell you started doing TRT.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, what it does, the reason why it's actually most appealing to me is that it's supposed to make the recovery easier. Like
Mhm.
that's the whole like benefit of it is just your body can actually recover, so then it can like adapt, instead of just getting its ass kicked over and over again. Right.
For me, I found that consistency is definitely key. If I'm periodic about it, I used to be able to kind of half-assed do things when I was younger and be kind of periodic, let it come and go. And then I wouldn't really have much of a price to pay. But nowadays, consistency is the only thing that makes it easier. Otherwise, you pay the price every time.
Every time you start back up again, right?
Try something new or whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the things I enjoy the meat space aspect of it, because we spend so much time in our heads as artists, or on the digital, it's inside that computer, right? You turn the power off, and everything that you've done over the last 10 hours just disappears with it.
Yeah.
So I really like that aspect of just being in meat space and being outside. I usually work out at night, like just hearing the sounds of the city, like feeling the wind, hearing the animals. And like I'm usually working out at night, so the city sounds different than it does in the day, and I really enjoy that. I feel a little bit more isolated, which I really enjoy. I feel like I don't listen to music. I just like to be just present right there, doing it and enjoying it.
That's cool.
Because it's a challenge that I enjoy doing. I think there's this mistaken concepts in all disciplines that the easier that it gets, the better you are, and therefore you'll enjoy it more. But I found that I enjoy the challenge of trying to do something more than just being good at it and rinse and repeat it,
Yeah, I think this is something I'm really missing in my own like physical activity, is like I have been focusing on just doing like body weight exercise, but it is just like about getting stronger, but I really need some sort of element in there that is about like enjoying moving my body around, which I don't think there's any other like greater sign of our digital age and how we've become so abstracted from our own like bodies that it becomes a novelty to like, oh, hey, my body can do things, to be able like to go to the playground and do like the monkey bars, or just whatever it is, being able to do something with your body where you're like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that,
I call it functional dad strength.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, I want to be able to go out and do things with my kids. And when we go to the playground, I want to play with them. And rather than just sitting on the sidelines and have them draw that distinction in their own minds of like, oh, my parents or my dad doesn't do this kind of thing because this is what kids do. It's like, no, there is no distinction. I enjoy doing these things too.
Yeah, it's like our bodies have become these prosthetic devices for our brains. They're these functional things that take us places and get things for us, but mostly just hurt a lot rather than being like actually a point of being alive. It's like, oh, you have a body. Like you can go hiking with it. Like you can, do handstands with it, climb around on things with it, roll on the ground, lift things up, throw things,
Yeah.
Like feels good to use your body.
Yeah, it totally does. And it has its benefits in art. I totally believe. Like I get these, the artist aches every once in a while, especially in my hands or my elbow. And it does correspond to how consistent I've been getting outside and doing things. Where I notice my hands hurt more and my elbow hurts more and my back hurts more if I haven't been getting outside regularly. So I know like artists like to sit crouched over their desks all day, but it's like, I think you'll be able to do more art with more physical enjoyment for a longer duration over the aggregate span of your life if you get outside and keep yourself fit,
Yeah, I just think the real key there is just finding something you enjoy. I think so many people think that exercise has to be this penance where they have to like sort of like atone for their sins of like laziness, by punishing their bodies to purify their bodies of junk food. But man, you really have to find something you love to do with your body. Like that is like the real key.
Yeah. For me, I also think of like the gratitude that you get out of it, especially now that I'm older. I see more people my age with big health problems. And it's like, man, I'm so grateful that I don't deal with that right now or yet.
Hmm.
You know, there's so many different situations where you think about how contrived it is sometimes to go to a box, a building, and then pretend to do all this functional stuff.
Yeah.
At the community college, I in one of my classes, and then consequently in one of my study groups, we worked together in a study group for a couple of weeks. Was one of these lost boys, one of these guys from Africa that came to Utah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and he would tell us stories about how he was running from being shot into the jungle, and then alligators were eating his friends, and he's one
Whoa.
of like half the group that survived and made it to the U.S. And it's like, wow, that's a different kind of necessity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I can get my adrenaline flow by going to a treadmill or a pec deck, right?
Yeah.
Instead of
Sure.
having to deal with those kind of necessities or traumas. And like, how fortunate are we that this is like a destination for us rather than a means of escape?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. We get to use our bodies just to like have fun,
Yeah, yeah,
not
totally,
to try to like save our lives.
totally.
So,
And especially being without a job, and as much as I enjoy it right now, it is hard for a lot of different reasons. But one of the
mhm,
best things I found is to not necessarily go outside and work out, but we also live
mhm,
right by the Jordan River Parkway.
mhm.
It's literally like one block from our house. And so I just go
Awesome.
down there and walk out, and I look at the birds and I look at the trees and the water, and I just think, oh yeah, this is what it's all about. This is why I want to get better at art.
Mm.
These are the kinds of things I want to evoke. I'm not going to put art first in my life over the expense of everything else, so that I can work for LucasArts drawing, droid crates. You know,
Yeah.
like I gotta put all this machinery to some better use.
That's what like art used to be. It was about like pointing people back to reality and saying like, look at what is happening. Look at
Uh-huh.
what, instead of hiding in some sort of like darkened, studio. Yeah. And designing droid crates. Right.
Yeah, totally. And that's where it's dovetailing with my interest in writing as well as what I want to be doing with my art, because I want to be drawing my own stuff too. Ideally, if I could make it happen, I'd like to be a writer artist and put out my own
Yeah.
things. But I'm still putting all those pieces together. But it seems to me like you're much further down that path than I am. You've already got a couple books under your belt.
Well, I've got a book that I mean, I did, I've done some things for a couple things for publishers. But I mean, technically you could say that, but it's also a path. It's like a path that goes in both directions. I was just chatting with some friends about this the other day, that it's like, just because you're breaking in doesn't mean you stay in. And there seems to be this thing where you can have a success, but that success isn't a guarantee that you're going to get someone's going to answer your phone call next time. So
Yeah.
my mind lately is much more along the lines of like, how can I separate like sustainability from like the actual making of art? So it's like, I want to keep making art, and I want to have as much freedom to make the type of art I want to as possible. And it seems like if I tie that to paying the bills, then it becomes an even harder. It becomes exponentially harder to solve that problem. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to kind of separate those things and say like, how can I sustain what I want to do, and then I can worry about the art I want to do as a separate problem.
Yeah. Where are you going? Are you going more into writing, or you wanna keep doing art directly?
Yeah, right now is a really exploratory period. I'm honestly not really interested in art right now. So I am more interested in. I'm interested in writing, so I'm spending more time writing. But I'm also interested in kind of looking outward and looking at like the contexts that inform the type of artist we are. So I mean, a lot of times when we're thinking about like becoming an artist and what that means, we think about it's very inward. We're thinking about like ourselves. What do we need to do? How does that satisfying? Like, how does that satisfy material needs? And I'm interested in like building things and developing things that are looking outwards as far as like, what are the physical context, and that gets into like, urban design stuff that I've shared with you before.
Yeah.
Like, how do you create spaces that are conducive to making art? And then like community is the other aspect of it, is like, okay, how do I create something that I can be part of that's meaningful? So it's more about thinking about the quality of the things you are a part of, rather than like how good you are at doing certain skills, if that makes any sense. And so far it's mostly talk. This is mostly talk, but I'd like to have something to show for it. These are the projects I'm interested in working on in the future. So.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Green Monk. I mean, that was so exactly the kind of story that I really like. That that Yojimbo, Samurai Jack, Wandering Warrior kind of thing. I just really like that. But I was so excited about Get Out of Turk. That looked really amazing to me. And I heard the difficulties expressed when you were talking with Derek about it and stuff. And it makes sense in today's climate, but man, I'd really like to see that book.
Yeah, maybe I can get back to that. It's I did have a publisher kind of make an offer on it, but I would have had to limit some things. And it was just like, it was at a point last year where it was just like way too risky. And and so I kind of turned it down. I said, maybe I'll come back later to do that. But I think I was at a time last year too, where I just had not figured out if that's really what I wanted to be doing. And so still not totally sure, but yeah, I was excited about that too. It was fun and different, and who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a quitter.
It's difficult to draw those distinctions for sure. Yeah, I fully believe in the tangential path. Where you don't need to necessarily see the end game, right? You just need to do the next right thing and take the next step. And some turns, some 90-degree turns, some 180-degree turns, they need to be taken at full speed. You can't just cautiously walk up to them. So it's like, just be all in, and then that tangential path goes wherever it goes.
Well, that's probably good play. I was waiting for like a good spot to wrap it up. I can't wrap it up by me going on me going on some big spiel about that thing I did a year ago. So that's a nice point. So Geoff, thanks again for hanging out with me. I need to talk about coming out and checking out the Ninja Warrior stuff sometime. So
I'd love to have you anytime, man. This has been fun.
All right, cool. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
You've been listening to How to Be an Artist. To support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/H2BNA.